Everybody Hates Rand is a Wheel of Time podcast that will contain spoilers for all 14 books. So if you're anti-spoiler, pause this, read all 14 books, and come back. We'll be here, waiting.
Our title is a joke and is meant to be taken as such. In the context of this podcast, everybody refers to us and our cat. You are free to feel however you want about Rand, who is a fictional character. Don't DM us.
The world is a mess, Dark One stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn, the fire's been fanned, but everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
Right now I have the haircut of the bard from The Witcher.
You look great.
It's very floppy.
Very floppy.
I did look into the Witcher anime.
Yeah.
Apparently it's like a prequel.
Oh, that's weird.
Which is especially confusing considering that The Witcher already has the world's absolute wackest timeline.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Netflix series, not the books or video games. I don't know anything about those. But apparently it's like about Geralt, who's the main guy. You know, white-haired Henry Cavill. Mm-hmm. Henry Cavill, the only time he looks kind of hot, which is when he's grimy. It's like the Aragorn filter, you know? Viggo Mortensen doesn't look good. All that attractive normally.
The Aragorn filter.
But when he's covered in dirt, you're like, I could get into that.
No, I get what you're saying. 100%.
Anyway, apparently it's about Geralt's mentor, who's also a Witcher. A Witcher.
Interesting.
So, which really just goes to show you that the show The Witcher should be called A Witcher.
A Witcher, not The Witcher. I didn't realize there was more than one Witcher.
Exactly. It's a very confusing article.
He was The Witcher.
He's A Witcher.
Dumb.
Hi,
Dumb.
this is Everybody Hates Rand. This is the second week in a row I've done that. God damn it. This is Everybody Hates Rand. I'm Emily Jushaw.
And I am Sally Gitcher.
We're your friendly neighborhood Wheel of Time podcast. Fuck, I keep fucking...
Do you want to do it a third time?
No, I stick to my guns, and also I want to get through this so I can make my pizza.
You know, sometimes I think, wow, I'm a really bad writer. And then I read... these sorts of chapters, and I think, well, at least I don't write horrific masturbatory chapters, pages upon pages of people just lamenting over fields of dead bodies.
And also just so much of Perrin's nose.
It's true. Also masturbatory chapters about Perrin's nose.
I wish you wouldn't have put Perrin's nose in the same sentence as the word masturbatory. So now I have to sort of live with that concept. Yeah, I don't really know why every time a character has like an extra sense, you know?
Yeah.
Or a hypersensory experience, we have to focus particularly on that sense. I wish it was a little better integrated into...
Yeah, it feels like it just comes and goes as Robert Jordan needs it.
I just kind of wish that instead of Perrin constantly being like, this person smells angry, this person looks angry but is actually very calm, we could just sort of gather those things from the dialogue and maybe the occasional hint from Perrin.
Emily, that would be called good writing.
I don't...
And that's not what this is. This is extremely bad writing. And Robert Jordan has to rely on the truly in-your-face mechanism of Perrin sniffing people in order to convey the interpersonal dynamics happening.
His mood ring of a nose, as we've referred to it before, which really, I mean, it is.
I hate these chapters.
Okay.
I just am really over people, particularly, like, I know Robert Jordan was in a war, so I'll give him that. But particularly, like, middle-aged white men writing about the quote-unquote horrors of war, which just ends up being these sort of, like, graphic descriptions of how sad everybody is, but ultimately connecting it back to a duty that everyone has to do. Like, warfare is a duty, rather than being like, if you are truly trying to say something about the horrors of war, perhaps you shouldn't write the horrors of war as a duty into your book. Maybe you should have characters finding ways to not make people die for them.
Yeah, it's a little, I didn't think of that. It's a little harder to stomach Perrin being like, God, I wish I hadn't sent all these men to their deaths, you know, if Perrin ever had the thought, like, maybe this was totally preventable.
Yeah.
Maybe if we had any sort of creative problem solving, or had been able to approach this in any sort, and I'm not saying that Dumais Wells could have been prevented, because the writing did not set it up to be a preventable problem.
It didn't.
Well, I mean, it did set it up to be a preventable problem, but that would have required Rand to be at all a person who cares about his own safety.
Yeah, as we discussed at length in season 6.
Yeah, so...
He's a dumb shit.
But, like, then again, Perrin could have been like, I wish I hadn't had to send these men to their deaths. I'm genuinely angry at Rand.
Yeah.
Which I feel like would be a kind of interesting take for that, especially because part of these chapters is to start to set up friction between Perrin and Rand. Mm-hmm. Which, spoiler alert, doesn't really go anywhere. It's set up to go somewhere. Later in this book, Perrin leaves Cairhien with his whole coterie, and we find out it's because he and Rand got into a big fight, and Perrin's basically been exiled, but then plot twist within a plot twist, they actually sort of staged the fight.
Yeah, it's a fake fight.
So that Perrin wouldn't, be under a ton of suspicion as he goes and does stuff on Rand's behalf. And I just think it would have been more interesting if I think we talk a lot about how we wish that characters in this book were actually allowed to be friends.
Yeah.
I also wish people in this book who were, set up initially as friends were allowed to delve a little deeper into their relationship in uncomfortable ways. That's one of the hardest things I've had to learn as a writer, is the art of leaving a moment uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, two characters are allowed to have an argument, and neither of them is necessarily right.
Yeah, and the argument also doesn't necessarily have to be resolved in some,
meaningful hug it out
way.
Moment.
Yeah, like, I have fights with people, and it's just like, oh, that was dumb. Or, you know what, we've moved on, because we're no longer the people we were when we had that fight.
Yeah, it, fizzles out.
Yeah.
Maybe you apologize. Hopefully you apologize. Maybe you don't, because people are people, and sometimes they don't apologize. I don't know. I just think it would be interesting if Perrin was like, wow, Rand sure made a lot of shitty decisions that led to this absolute bloodbath.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty resentful toward him, and I'm resentful of my position here. And I'm going to, act it all differently because of that.
Yeah, I think that's what's killing me is Perrin laments this. And Rand does the same thing, particularly with women, which I don't even want to talk about anymore because it's so
this is probably the most egregious example of it, is Rand systematically going through the battlefield at Dumais Wells searching for dead women whose names he can add to his list, which only 2 comments about that, and then we will move on. And both of my comments are logistic. One is, how do they know everybody's names? Yeah. Are you telling me a Mies is a goddamn encyclopedia for every maiden in the Ale Waste?
That's
they're not wearing dog tags.
Perrin is I listened to Rand cite off 151 maidens.
Yeah.
And it's I'm sorry, but it's impossible. Yeah. Especially with how crazy things would be after the battle. No one's gonna be around to be okay, Dragon Reborn, let's feed this specific neuroses of yours.
Weren't you just talking about how there's a limit of number of names you can know?
I think it is 150. The number of connections you can have before you start losing meaning, I think actually is 150.
Which is not to say Rand can't, I guess, memorize 150 names. I'm mostly impressed at the speed with which he does it, although I guess it's supposed to be a symptom of his maybe madness. I actually have 2 more logistical comments. One is, how many women is this? Because Perrin says like 150, but isn't that before Rand goes out on the battlefield?
Yeah.
Looking
so
for
there are more.
So shouldn't there be like, especially because of the insane number we were given at the end of book 6 for how many people there were.
Yeah.
Or there be just like thousands upon thousands? This reminds me of last night when I said that there have probably been 1,000 popes.
There have not been 1,000
Sally
popes.
immediately called me out. There have only been 260, okay?
Okay, what were your other logistic
My
questions?
other logistical question was, and this one is gross, I'm sorry. If you are triggered by gore, just skip the next 30 seconds. But considering that there was a human meat grinder at the end of Dumai's Wells, are there or are there not some bodies that are simply not identifiable?
Oh, there has to be.
Isn't that, like, really bothering Rand?
I mean, you would think if Robert Jordan was actually committed to the verisimilitude of his human meat grinder.
Well, I mean, and also the verisimilitude of Rand having what appears to be an obsessive-compulsive disorder regarding these women's names.
Yeah.
And his list, specifically. That's a very common obsessive-compulsive thing, is having to go through routines, like a list.
Yeah.
Until, just you're compelled to do it from start to finish. And Rand has that symptom throughout the series, but then wouldn't he be like, oh my gosh, it's bothering me so much that I don't know some of these women's names?
It's interesting. That's a good point. That's really interesting.
I would be bothered. Okay, anyway, those are my logistical questions, and we've already talked about how dumb and misogynistic it is that Rand has to remember all the dead women. So moving right along.
Yeah, but just wrapping up my major complaint about this is, like, Perrin just goes on and on constantly throughout the series, and Rand does it too. I'm sure Matt has some vague feelings about it at some point.
Vague feelings is the best way to put it, I think, when it comes to Matt.
Yeah. About just, like, you being the person responsible for asking men usually to go to their deaths in a battle. Perrin just, like, is racked with guilt about it. Rand is often racked with guilt about it. And it's like, then change your behavior. Like, you can try and make decisions. It just feels like they're never really seeking solutions that aren't warfare-based.
Yeah.
Like, Perrin is never just like, actually, I am just going to send the Two Rivers men home. Because Rand has given me other armies, and I can control that these 200 men go home, or something like that.
Yeah, all my childhood friends. It's really bothering my mental health that I'm specifically sending people that I know and love to their deaths.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of a thing with being an army general, is you have to depersonalize.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't. War's bad, and you should never send people to their deaths, but, like, that's a fucking given.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be a successful army general, I assume in the sphere of warfare, as men love to write about it, then I'd imagine you kind of have to depersonalize your armed forces.
Yeah, so it just, again, is this, like, thing with Perrin, which we've talked about, which is just this sort of, like, back and forth between violence and pacifism. This sort of, like, there are two wolves inside of you.
Yeah, God.
I think that's always going on with Perrin. And it's like, I'm just so sick of it. Like, if you're so bothered by it, make different decisions. Call Rand out on his shit, send people home. Don't put yourself in positions where you have to make wartime decisions. Like, you have agency, you rat piece of shit.
Yeah, it's interesting that Perrin, like you said, is constantly having this back and forth between pacifism and violence, but he never actually explores pacifism as a lifestyle. Yeah. So he's really just sort of, like, thinking longingly about pacifism. And not even really thinking longingly about it, just thinking condescendingly about it. And thinking, like, pacifist people are so dumb because they don't understand that sometimes you have to do violence. But then whenever he has to do violence, he's like, God, I wish I was dead. I'm worthless. I'm the worst person alive.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Just self-flagellating himself.
Yes.
Flagellating himself, not self-flagellating himself. That's a double possessive.
He's doing it so much that it somehow has become self-flagellating. Flagellating.
Gross. Let's never say the word flagellating again. Just makes me think of that scene in the Da Vinci Code with Paul Bettany.
Oh yeah, it makes me think of that guy in fucking Castlevania.
Oh yeah. Did we also see his bum?
I don't know. We see quite a lot of nudity in Castlevania.
Yeah, which is surprising. I just think it's so funny that I've seen Paul Bettany's bum so many times.
You know, Paul Bettany's like, we should write my bum into this movie.
Yeah,
And
Paul
they're
Bettany
like,
walks
Paul.
onto us. Paul, this isn't a commonly known fact, but Paul Bettany didn't want to sign up onto the MCU because they wouldn't show his bum because it's a PG-13.
Like, we can't show your bum in Iron Man. And he was like, I'm out then. Sorry. It's important that the world sees my bum as much as possible.
Although, did you hear in Age of Ultron, which is when Vision is introduced, Joss Whedon wanted to go the Dr. Manhattan route and just have Vision's dick just fully out.
That's pretty funny.
That might have been a joke I read on Tumblr, but either way, I think it's a funny thing to say.
It is very funny.
I had one other thought about warfare and stuff. Like you were talking about how Rand and Perrin are always racked with guilt. I think the point Robert Jordan is trying to make, and I'm not saying it's a good point, I think the point Robert Jordan is trying to make by having the two of them specifically be so torn up about this every time it happens is that it's part of their coming of age in that Perrin and Rand are two very sheltered young men who would never have had to deal with this if their lives had gone the expected courses, which I'm sure Robert Jordan could personally relate to.
Yeah.
And I think Robert Jordan was also probably interested in interrogating the fantasy tropes, which I don't know the exact, chronology of how fantasy books were, but I think Robert Jordan set up Wheel of Time to be a bit of a foil to Lord of the Rings in some ways, and Lord of the Rings takes the very poetic tradition in terms of its warfare and just sort of skimming over the horrors of it. And Robert Jordan wants to be like, look how grim and awful it is. And that point is sort of tangentially made by having Matt, who, not through his own volition, but through magical means, has been completely desensitized to warfare. Matt seems to us to have the healthiest response to what's going on because Matt has technically lived through it hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Yeah.
And so he has all the coping mechanisms he probably needs.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I think that is Robert Jordan's point he's making. I think he is belaboring the point. We are in book 6. These boys were in a major battle in book 2. The point should have been made then, maybe talked about a little further in book 3 and 4. I think we're far past it by now.
Yeah, and you make such valid points about just obviously Robert Jordan's personal experiences and like the tradition in which he's writing. And like I feel like what I've said about Perrin and Rand could probably be a little insensitive to characters who are obviously dealing with pretty extreme PTSD regarding warfare. And so in that vein, I apologize. That's definitely an element to consider with like everything that's going on with them. But I do agree from like a narrative perspective that it's a little too late. Like I could see why it's coming up again after Dumai's Wells, because this is a particularly brutal instance of this. Plus it's also sort of, again, elevating it. Like Rand, like we've talked about, basically turned boys into nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why it's so frustrating that Perrin is just like, well, this is sad. He's not like,
Yeah.
Rand literally had a bunch of magic boys completely obliterate people. He's just sort of like vaguely uncomfortable by the Asha'man being around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, he's like, I don't really like the Asha'man in the same way he doesn't really like the Aes Sedai. And I'm like, you're not worried at all about, like, the Aes Sedai are a long tradition that you can't really do anything about, They're just sort of an element of this world. But the Asha'man are a brand new thing, and you're not like, so where did that come from, bud?
Like, maybe your magic school of war criminal boys is a bad idea.
Yeah, he sees all these women being afraid of Mazrim Tem, and he's not like, maybe they're right. This man trained a bunch of war criminals.
Maybe they're right.
Anyway.
This man is a psycho. A full-blown lunatic in charge of the youth.
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to communicate is that Robert Jordan can write accurately and to his own experiences about PTSD, and that fact can coexist with the narrative reality that this isn't very good or fun writing.
Yeah, and just, again, like, not to belabor my own point, complaining about Robert Jordan belaboring his point, but, like, narratively, your characters should make decisions that push the story forward, and it feels like Rand and Perrin are incapable of making decisions about their specific problems with warfare, which is so frustrating when Rand is, like, literally in charge of the world.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I'd feel a lot differently about this if this marked a turning point for Perrin or Rand, or even if just we didn't have to deal with this sort of monologuing about the horrors of war in the future. But we definitely do every time it happens for Perrin, and to a lesser extent for Rand. I mean, yeah, Rand and Perrin both do some pretty fucked up shit in the future regarding warfare. More fucked up, I would argue, than Matt, who invents cannons.
Yeah, Matt is just like, I would like to have some cannons because Ebudar has literally been invaded by a fascist regime who is also using magic people as really dangerous weapons. So I would like a way to fight back. And it's like, yeah, I don't agree that using cannons is maybe the best thing, but like, he's trying.
At least he's problem solving,
Yeah,
you know?
he's like, I think that is a pretty reasonable response to the threat. Rand is like, no, I will literally explode people.
Yeah, I just think Matt saw a bunch of ladies, enslaved women exploding people and was like, what's a way that I can combat this? Because it's clearly not going away, and I don't have the expectation of being able to fucking change a fascist regime. Mm-hmm. What's a way that I can combat this realistically without traumatizing a bunch of other people? And he invents cannons, combining his passion for fireworks into that discovery. And Rand is like, I haven't even witnessed women blowing men up. I'm just going to sort of, in a vacuum, invent men blowing people up. And use that for funsies.
No, not again to just get on our Matt worship high horse.
I just love him.
But I really do think that the inventions of cannons is completely reasonable given what he's dealing with. I think Rand is just completely out in left field with the Explosion Boys, TM.
Yeah, I think it's really funny how much this series is like, oh my god, Matt is making this horrendous world-changing discovery when they literally have magic people blowing up other magic people.
Yeah, like, why is it okay when the Ashaman do it, but it's bad when a cannon does it?
Like, in book 13 or whatever, I feel like Matt does, like, a display for Elaine or something of the cannons. He's like, look, they work. You should buy them. Basically. And Elaine's like, oh my god, this is so cool, but also scary. Wow. And it's like, why? Just because non-magic people can use them?
Wow, a leveling technology?
You've just been up until this point, you have just been relying on the fucking honor system for magic people to not blow up people, which clearly doesn't work over in Shanshin, where there is no honor system. And doesn't work for men, for whom there is no honor system, apparently.
It also doesn't work for the Aes Sedai, for whom there is no honor system, because Elaine and Nynaeve enslaved a woman.
I mean, the Aes Sedai are like, there's an honor system, but we will find all the loopholes.
There's the pretense of an honor system.
Serious, which, by the way, is a really funny argument between Perrin and one of the Aes Sedai ladies. He's like, thanks a lot for leaving your fucking station. And she's like, yeah, did you want us to use our powers or not? Because we wouldn't have been able to do anything back where you'd positioned us. And I'm like, why didn't you guys have this fucking conversation?
The, 18 days you rode over to Dumai's Wells, no one thought.
Yeah, we know that they, made a plan and that Karuna was in on it. And she just didn't say, pipe up and be like, well, that won't work for us.
I don't know.
I don't fucking... Whatever. What a dumb argument.
Okay. Yeah. No, just... It's fine. Cannons, no.
Okay.
Ashaman, yes.
Getting into some actual
sorry.
synopsis. No, I think we have covered most of our feelings, I think. it's just Perrin sitting on the ground feeling sorry for himself, as almost every Perrin chapter starts. I'm not gonna lie. Just Perrin pitying himself.
Woe is Perrin.
Woe is Perrin. Woe is Perrin. Perrin's sitting with Aram, whose name I can never fucking decide how to pronounce. And he's just sort of,
A.A. Raw.
A.A. Rom. Hey, A.A. Rom. He's just sort of observing the goings-on of this little camp. It's confusing because he talks about being surrounded by wagons, which initially makes you think that they're on the hill that Dumai's Wells sort of was the epicenter of.
Yeah.
But actually they're about a mile away from that. Was sort of where their supply wagons, I guess, were when they entered the battle.
Yeah.
Perrin is noticing a lot of simmering tensions, which I think we talked about at the end of last book as he led this same group of people into battle. And, spoiler alert, he's going to be with this same group of people in the future, so it's not going away. But he's like, oh dang, the Ale and the Kyrianan really hate each other, and the Mainers don't really care, but they would probably side with the Kyrianan if it came to it, and so would the Two Rivers guys, because, you know, the Ale are heavily racialized, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there's an element of Western European, if not white supremacy, at work here, which is super fun. Meanwhile, the Ashaman are all standing around like a bunch of creeps.
No.
There are a bunch of Shadow captives who have been taking Guy Shane, and they're all naked, and it's making most of the people who have not been exposed to a lot of nudity uncomfortable. And the Ale think that's really funny, and instead of respecting people's boundaries, are just like, hey, let me put my tits in your face, or whatever.
Yeah.
And Robert Jordan's like, isn't that hilarious? And I'm like, not really.
I mean, none of it is funny. These people have been enslaved.
Yeah, it's their
I know it's part of their culture, but I don't know if that makes it okay.
Voluntary indentured servitude, I don't know. We haven't really talked about the ethics of the Guy Shane system. It's sort of something I'm afraid to touch.
It's just also bad.
It's just also not fun to think about. But meanwhile, the sort of elephant in the room is the group of White Tower, Aes Sedai, for the sake of distinguishing them, all of the women who have been taken captive. These are not the women who swore fealty to Rand. They're all being guarded by Ashaman. 3 of them were stilled in the fight, and they are sort of a fucking downer for everyone around them. Perrin looks at them and is like, wow, that's just a huge bummer. Just 3 depressed women who can never use magic again.
That sucks.
Dang. The warders are off in their own separate little group being watched by the Ashaman. Apparently they've made a couple of rescue/escape attempts to no avail until finally the Aes Sedai were like, stop trying to rescue us. And they were like, fine, whatever. Perrin does give us an approximate list of... Oh, I opened right to it. Perrin does give us an approximate list of the women who will be relevant.
This was so funny to me. I was like, nobody thinks this way.
He says he had caught a double handful of names. And I'm like, you caught all their first names and their last names and remembered them?
It's not a double handful.
And they just happen to be all the names that will be sort of significant? That's nice. But basically, these are all the women who are going to go through Varen's brainwashing lobotomy tent. And come out the other side, more or less. We've got Nasoon, Arian, who was one of... Yes, we know her name sounds like Arian, like the Nazi thing. She's one of the ones who tortured Rand. Katarine, who is Red Aja, and I believe will escape a little bit later. Koiren, who was sort of, I think, the head of their little embassy in... name, if not in reality. She's like a Grey Sister. Serene, whose one defining characteristic is that she's very pretty. Elsa, who is, spoiler alert, Black Aja, so you can guess how well Varen's lobotomy is going to work on her.
Jesus.
Then Janine, Beldine, and Marith. I don't remember Janine and Marith. I know fucking Janine. It's probably pronounced Janina.
Janina.
I remember Beldine being relevant, but not Marith or Janine. So, just sort of helpfully, now we have some...
Very helpfully,
names.
Perrin has caught all those names and provided them to us.
Anyway, Perrin's all worried because everyone is kind of like, we want to do something about these Aes Sedai. And sort of the prevailing sentiment, at least according to Aram's like, maybe we should just murder the Aes Sedai, and that would, take care of the problem. And Perrin's like, I mean, it would certainly take care of that problem. It would create a whole new set of problems, though.
Throw a Molotov cocktail, boom, different problem.
Anyway, Perrin's like, no, we shouldn't do that. They're women, Aram. They're helpless women who have never learned to defend themselves without magic. And I'm like, I think murder's bad no matter who you're doing it to.
Yeah, Perrin's, missed the point.
Regardless of what genitals you have, murder is bad. I wanted that to be our PSA for the episode. Okay? Duh. Fucking duh.
Get it through your heads, kids.
Ugh.
You can't murder.
That's an episode. It's a new Arthur episode. You can't murder people. Duh.
Duh.
So, then Perrin gets all nervous about how other people might want to murder the Aes Sedai. He's like, damn, anyone in this fucking group could just fucking nerf the Aes Sedai. And it could cause a whole lot of chaos. And it's like, but I don't think it's... I don't think it's that big of a
I know,
a deal.
his little psychopath friend is like, maybe we should kill the Aes Sedai, and then Perrin is like, oh my god, everyone is thinking the same thing that Aram is thinking.
Well, he's like, oh my god, it smells foul with how much people don't like each other. And I'm like, most of the time people manage to not like each other, yet coexist without murdering each other. I do it every day at work,
God, seriously. I've done it all throughout the pandemic without just smacking an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah, as much as I want to.
Yeah, as much as I would love to just dunk their heads in the toilet.
I'm not saying a set of circumstances doesn't exist where I wouldn't, but I think if I also knew it would lead to armed conflict where a bunch of people would get killed, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, Perrin gets all nervous and then is like, I'm gonna go talk to Rand. Too bad Rand is on the battlefield. Lamenting dead women. But he goes out there and is like, blah, 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 lots of dead bodies. He reminds us of some of the key characters, including Dobrain, who's in charge of the Kyrianan contingent, a guy named Nurel,
Sure.
who's in charge of the Maynard contingent, who's had kind of a sad arc in the last 48 hours, where he was all gung-ho to do violence, and now he's like, I'm 10 years older, and violence is bad.
Yeah.
Rand's out there with a bunch of the wise ones, and also his two maiden bodyguards, Sulin and Nandera, and of course he has Min. Every description of Rand and Min is nauseating in this, particularly because they're acting like they're on a walkabout date.
Yeah.
When they're literally investigating dead bodies. Like, Perrin's like, Min is hanging onto Rand's arm, and occasionally they, talk and laugh.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
How can you laugh?
How can you laugh?
When you're walking around with your quasi-boyfriend while he investigates dead women to add to his lamentation.
Perrin's like, I don't really know why Min is out there. I guess it's possible that being with Rand is the only place she feels safe after she got kidnapped and he sort of rescued her. And I'm like, well, that would be true and totally valid if there weren't some logical fallacies there. Number one is that Rand did not rescue Min. Min, I believe, just sort of got out in all the fighting.
Yeah.
And went to find Rand. Number two is that we know for a fact that Min is a, extremely weirdly written cool girl whore who will do anything to get next to Rand.
Yeah.
Including wear very tight pants and walk through death fields. So.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will see my boyfriend.
Whatever. Rand and them turn around, having successfully compiled Rand's dead women list. Mazrim Tem's out there, too.
Like, if it could not get any worse.
Yeah, it's rancid.
Mazrim Tem is there.
Rand gets back, and Perrin goes forward to talk to him about his issues, but immediately everyone starts... Oh, he also has that little conversation with Karuna, who's sort of the leader of the... I don't want to call them the Salidar Aes Sedai, the other Aes Sedai, who have sworn fealty to Rand, because they're not all from Salidar. But Karuna goes up to Rand. There's immediately a huge argument about what to do with the captive Aes Sedai. Rand finally is like, here's what we're going to do. The Wise Ones are in charge of all the Aes Sedai. Not just the captive Aes Sedai, but also the ones who have sworn fealty to me. And I think we'll just talk about that later, because we don't really have time to talk about it now, but that'll be a thing.
It certainly will be.
It certainly is. And whether that's like an ethical decision, I think is something we can talk about later.
Yeah, I mean, Rand is really just making some ethically whack decisions right and left.
Rand orders Alana to heal him because he's all banged up from being in the box and whatnot. They have a very creepy interaction that mostly tips off Mazrim Tem, who, as a reminder, is Demandred, not exclamation point Demandred, but may as well be. That Alana and Rand are bonded, which is an advantage to the dark side, because they can be like, oh, here's a woman who, if she dies, Rand will go into a weird killing rage, because that's a side effect of the warder bond. That's dumb.
Yeah, I mean, Rand just sort of, like, closing his eyes and pointing at Alana in the crowd wasn't,
could you be any more obvious?
Strategic move on his part.
But then he does also do that to Dashiba.
That's very good.
Who is one of the Forsaken, I feel like we should point out, so... Don't know if Luz Thorin's Forsaken senses were tingling.
But to anyone else looking on, it's like Rand can point out sexy women and crazy old men.
It's his two senses. Perrin has a magic nose. Rand has crazy middle-aged men detector. And Alana, who might as well be a crazy middle-aged man.
It is very funny when he's just like, that one.
Crazy pervert, let's say that. It's a genderless thing.
Yeah, there we
Rand
go.
has a crazy pervert.
There we go. I like that.
Okay.
Crazy pervert.
So, that happens.
The gender-neutral term pervert.
Yeah. Then Mazrim Tem's like, I really feel like you should take more Ashaman, and Rand's like, no, I'm fine with my 4 soldiers and my 4 dedicated, blah, 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 blah. Mazrim Tem's like, please, sir. And Rand's like, fine, I'll take that guy. Like, Dashiva is just over there, like, picking his teeth and sort of staring into the middle distance, muttering to himself.
Yeah.
He looks like Pigpen in the Charlie.
And everyone is like...
And Mazrim Tem's like, okay, if that's the one you want.
This might as well happen.
Mazrim Tem has a weird reaction to that. I don't know if he knows that Dashiva is one of the Forsaken, and it's kind of like... Because Mazrim Tem is like, I'd rather you took one of my guys, which Rand doesn't understand, but we, the reader, know. Mazrim Tem has his little coterie of evil followers. And so he clearly wants to have more, like, strings on Rand, but, you know, if he were just a dark friend, he'd probably be, like, trying to set up Dashiva and Rand to be together, so it's unclear whether Mazrim Tem knows he is Forsaken.
Which Forsaken is Dashiva?
I'm sorry if I spoiled that for you. I don't know when it comes up. Dashiva
It just makes this scene way more funnier, actually, so I'm glad you told me.
So, Dashiva is the counterpart to Arengar. He is Osengar, who is Agenor reborn.
Okay.
Agenor died in Book 1. I believe Rand actually killed him. He was the one who Rand, like, burned or whatever.
Okay.
And then Agnor was resurrected in this body and then immediately went undercover at the Black Tower. And now is part of Rand's coterie. So things are coming up Osengar.
Yeah.
Know what I'm saying?
Oh, how the turntables, Mr. All Thor.
Too bad he does have to pretend to be super crazy. But whatever.
I mean...
We will get in the next few chapters, I believe, an introduction to all of Rand's boys, who Perrin sort of obliquely references.
Yeah, it's mostly a really good set of boys.
Yeah, there are 9 of them, including Dashiva. 2 of them are going to end up with Perrin, which leaves the other 7 to sort of orbit around Rand, although I think he kind of sends a few off on errands every once in a while.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about it. But Rand basically is like, let's everyone get ready to go. So everyone gets ready to go. Milesram 10 leaves. All the Ashman, except for Rand's Ashman, leave. Then Perrin finally gets a minute alone with Rand and is like, hey, excuse me, I think there might be a murder. And Rand's like, what if I let there be a murder? And Perrin's like, well, then I would stop you. And Min's like, could you guys not be insane for 5 fucking minutes?
Yeah. She's like, neither of you are going to do anything about the
This
Aes
is
Sedai.
so
Shut up.
stupid. Shut up. And I'm like, finally, Min makes a valid point.
Yeah, seriously.
Then Rand's like, Min, have you seen any interesting and plot relevant auras? And she's like, no, they're all blurry because everyone's channeling. And then she's like, don't worry, Perrin. All the Ale know that I can see the future, and they're all really cool with it, unlike all the people in my backstory who weren't. And then she gives us like a 3-paragraph retelling of her tragic backstory that we have not known until now. Literally have spent 6 books knowing Min, and never once has it come up like, what was the first time you saw the future? What happened?
She was almost burned at the stake as a witch.
Yeah, they were like,
basically.
my aunts had to be like, no, don't worry, she's just a 12-year-old. She's not, meeting with the devil in the woods or whatever.
Yeah, like, there are, like, literally white cloaks in the town, and she's being accused of nonsense. And the whole town, like, mobs her. It's like, this is when you want to drop this nugget in, Robert Jordan?
He's
right
like,
after Dumai's Wells?
I'm not really good at, like, fleshing out my female characters. I'll just sprinkle this in for flavor.
Yeah, fully wild. It's so wild.
So wild. But, then they all get up to leave. I believe that's that.
That is those 2 chapters.
The next 3 chapters, which is what we're reading next, everyone will get back to Cairhien, and will have to deal with the fact that, what's her name? Colavir.
Oh, yeah.
Usurped the throne while Rand was gone. Perrin will have to reconfront his shitty marriage. Another constant plot thread for Perrin. And that's kind of it. We'll get a little more, just sort of exposition. Introducing the Ashma and stuff like that, I believe.
My boys.
Our boys.
Give me Grady and Niald, or give me death.
I love those 2. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week with 3 chapters. Thanks to Glenna McKenzie for our theme song. Thanks to our patrons on Patreon. Thanks to our social media followers. Do you have anything else?
Thanks for saying such nice things about the podcast coming back.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know if I said that
nice.
last week, but
Yeah.
everyone left a bunch of really nice comments.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
And, do you have a sign off?
Yes. A couple of weeks ago, I helped my brother and his family move up to Washington, which is where they now live. But I had to work while I was doing it, so I was, like, driving with them during the week and then helping them for a few days. But I still had to work, like, my 9-to-5 job, Monday through Friday, which meant that one of these days I had to listen to an all-staff meeting. But the Wi-Fi wasn't set up at my brother's house yet, so I just had it on, like, my phone, my work phone. And I was like, I'm not going to listen to this all. Like, I'm going to have it going, show that I'm there. Yeah. And, of course, this was the all-staff meeting where they decided that rather than have it be, like, webinar style where just, like, a few people are presenting, like, everyone is, participant in the all-staff meeting, and everyone has, like, audio and video.
Oh, no.
And so I got unmuted while I was, like, in the bathroom changing clothes and also, like, changing my pad. So my boss and I, like, was probably muttering to myself, and my boss finally texted me and she's like, "You're unmuted." And so I had to be like, "Oh, sorry, I was changing my niece's diaper." So sorry, Zoe. Blamed you for that one.
Oh my god.
It was so bad, you guys. It was so bad.
It's like the nightmare.
Yeah. I can laugh about it now, but I was not pleased afterwards.
Okay, everyone. I hope your week is better than that.
Yeah, it was a rough one, friends.
Bye.
Bye.